So someone the other day asked me, what did we do before we met in coffee shops? So he had seen me meeting someone for coffee the other day, and I just laughed because I said, we met in each other's houses. And it kind of took me on a walk down memory lane a little bit, a walk down friendships, people that have come and gone out of my life, some great times of going to somebody's house in the morning for coffee and chit chat while the kids were young, sometimes in my pajamas, and, you know, hair just as is, no makeup, and just living life together. Sometimes we'd say, hey, what do we want for lunch? And we would maybe share something, our local fish and chips place. I remember that. A pizza from a local place we bring back home because the kids were small. And, just thinking about my family growing up and how I grew up, uh, 80s, 90s. And we had an apartment. I had an apartment with a friend for a short period of time, and we just had people at our house all the time. It wasn't about food always. I mean, sometimes I made things. Sometimes I was making an egg salad sandwich, and a friend said, oh, I haven't had an egg salad for a long time. I said, well, just come over. It wasn't about how clean your house was, how um, Pinterest worthy your house was. It wasn't that. It was really, this is me. And, of course, growing up, I had certain days that we would have to clean and dust, and my sister hated dusting, and clean the toilets, wipe down the sinks, all those things that you have to do in a home. And those are things that I learned how to, take care of home. And so, of course, that kind of thing happened, and people didn't live with the excess like they do now. So I just think that you were always ready for somebody to stop by. Not because like you planned for it, but we had a garden, we canned, my mom canned mainly. Um, we had our own beef a lot of times, so there was always a roast to take out of the freezer or, and this was actually before microwaves. In fact, when we got a microwave, my mom had to take a microwave cooking class. And so, there's just things that you just don't think about, when my cousins, my aunt and uncle would go for a drive, and all of a sudden they show up with my cousins. Well, we were excited, like, oh, right, we've got visitors. And, I don't rarely, I think in younger years, my mom said and dad would say, oh, great, here they come, because their kids were unruly and they would break toys. And so they would put things up and they would walk on the furniture. And my parents really took care of things. So it was a different, but you learned those things about family, right? And so, just kind of thinking about that conversation about coffee shops versus having people in your house kind of took me down memory lane a little bit. And I was thinking, this is summer. It's the sixth summer without having a parent. And my dad, it's been almost 15 years. So my mom was 6 years. And they were married for 51 years before my dad passed. So that was quite a long time. And oh gosh, it wasn't necessarily a perfect relationship, but they stayed together. And I know that gave me security. But I just think of like, I wouldn't say that it was a Sunday dinner that I remember as much as, but I remember family coming from out of town. We live in Washington State, and we had relatives in Canada and Missouri, and they would come, throughout the year. Sometimes my uncle would come from Hawaii, and we knew there was a family dinner, and it wasn't, we always had the good dishes out. We had to set the table, which I had to remember that the other day helping somebody. I forgot like what side that, the fork went on. And so we would do that. My parents weren't big coffee drinkers, so it wasn't usually, sometimes there was coffee depending on who was coming, but usually always punch, not necessarily. I think there was probably a pitcher of water with, ice available, but most people took punch. It was kind of a treat. You didn't normally have punch. That was a special occasion. And my mom always like found different punch recipes that she would break out of, at different times because she wanted to try something new. But she would, usually take out something that was had been in the freezer, knowing that they were coming. Sometimes it was like, oh, well, she would make her stuffed shells, which was kind of a lasagna and bread and salad and usually some kind of dessert. Sometimes it was her opportunity to try a new dessert. And usually it was out of the Better Homes and Garden red and white check cookbook, which I have my mom's and it's well worn. And there's a lot of the pages that have kind of been torn out of the binder, but it's like something I remember. And, people go, how do you learn to make pies? Well, I opened up the Better Homes and Garden. It's called, I always want to say Betty Crocker, but it actually is the red and white checkbook. So I open it up. Last year I had a neighbor, an elderly neighbor that moved into a facility and her family had an estate sale and they had her cookbook in there and it had her name in it. And it was similar to my mom's. They got married around the same time. And I was like, oh, I have to get this. This is Karen's cookbook. Just, memory lane for me, right? It might not mean anything to anybody else, but like, okay, so earlier I made a quiche with the pie recipe from the Better Homes and Garden cookbook. Earlier in the week, somebody gave me cherry pie or pie cherries, which are hard to come by. They had told me that their grandfather has a pie cherry tree, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's like my favorite pie, because you just don't get to make it very often. And so she brought me pie cherries, and I made a pie, and I got to share the pie with somebody, my friend, my neighbor, and her dad. Her dad doesn't live with her, but her parents, her mom passed away a year ago, and so he just enjoys having home cooking, and he's 89, and he's not going to have these kind of things, and so he's not worried about calories either. And I just think these are the things we did for each other. We would sometimes my mom knew somebody was coming and she'd make a pie. It was summertime, or she actually would freeze them and bring them out and cook them when we had family come. So there was just things of like you learned to entertain on a budget. They didn't have a big food budget because we had a garden and all that stuff. And but even without the garden part, they didn't have peaches, but my dad always brought home boxes of peaches to can. And I mean we just always had excess in some capacity. It might be the charcuterie board of the 70s and 80s, and even the 90s was crackers and cheese and summer sausage. Relish tray, maybe my mom canned pickles, she canned pickle beets, um, sometimes breaking out a can of olives, and, just whatever you had on hand. I'm saying all this to say sometimes it's good to walk down memory lane. Sometimes we don't want to forget the things that we know we walked through. Kids today, people today have forgotten what it's like to not have a cell phone, not have instant access to somebody. Hey, are you home? Can I stop by? Do people stop by? No, you make appointments with people and you meet them at coffee shops or you meet them for dinner. And, what is it like just to sit around somebody else's table? Does their house have to be perfect? Does it have to be Pinterest ready? I don't think so. I think, go over to grandma's house and the furniture is mismatched. Maybe the end tables are a matching set. The kitchen's dated. But what are the goodies that come out of that kitchen? Are they better than the store-bought? They taste better than those cookies that are all decorated beautifully. Most of those cookies to me are like, they're kind of bland. But think about what you could do for somebody else. If it is learn to bake a pie, try it for the first time, take them a piece, make cookies. Like it doesn't have to be that difficult. Now we're getting Pillsbury bar cookies that you get out of the refrigerated section and you're putting them on a. Have you looked at the back to see what the chemical content is in those? I mean, it's just crazy. I actually think people were thinner back in the day because we ate real food. And a treat, a snack wasn't like a granola bar filled with sugar or fruit snacks filled with sugar. It was, my mom would say, here's a half a sandwich, or couldn't even tell you. Like, I remember we didn't have dessert all the time, but when she would make pie in the middle of the day, I mean, it was like, this is insane. So we, all got a piece because it would be divvied out so much. And usually she had like a leftover so she could put a piece in my dad's lunch, which he always took lunch. And it was usually leftovers. So, just a lot of fun things to think about. But I'm just going to encourage you to step out of yourself today. If only you invite somebody to coffee, then invite somebody to coffee. Get out of, especially if you're like me and you live by yourself, you have to go outside of yourself. But when was the last time you talked to your neighbor? Or even, hey, maybe make your favorite cookies. Maybe make that batch of cookies that reminds you of growing up and take a few to the neighbor. Or meet a friend for coffee and take them a bag of cookies. Another thing that I did, and I'll just say this as I end, during 2020, there was, kind of the shutdown, and we were maybe less shut down than other people. It was like a couple weeks. And I was like, hey, I'm a baker. I like to bake when I'm bored. And so I made snickerdoodles, and I make these like smaller size snickerdoodles and a couple bite size, so that I'm going to make snickerdoodles and I'm going to snickerdoodle people. So what I would do is I would put a baggie on their porch and I would text them and I would say, hey, you've been snickerdoodle, go look on your porch. And they're like, oh, I got cookies. So, think about something that you could do to make somebody's day. Hey, maybe you have a rhododendron bush, or um, hydrangea bush is probably right about now. And there's so many extra blossoms. Take a couple to somebody that lives next door. Or somebody at church, somebody that's like been lonely. Maybe they lost their husband. Maybe they just lost a parent, or, maybe they have kids that live away, or maybe they don't have kids. But, think about, see, just pray about it. See what God brings to your mind. Who does he put on your heart that you just need to bless in a maybe they just need an act of kindness in their life, or maybe it's just that they need to see that they're not invisible. And the thing is when you start doing that, it comes back at you because people see you. People will remember you for, oh, she did that one thing when I needed it and I didn't know I needed it. And she thought of me. And and also it's just a reminder that God thinks of them too. So as I end this, I always want to end in prayer. And so, Lord, I just pray for everyone that is listening to this conversation today. I pray that it sparks something in them, that it sparks a memory of the past, of something good, even in those places where there's memories that weren't so good. I pray for that one little glimmer of hope that was a little nod from you that would give them a little hope to the future. And I pray that they would, their eyes to be open to someone that needs to be seen this week, someone that they can go out of their way to just brighten their day. Lord, we just thank you for all that you do in our lives. We are just thankful for you. Amen. So bless you. Have a great rest of your day. Enjoy your summer. Take some time to smell the flowers. And we'll see you next time. Like, follow, do those things. And hopefully you'll enjoy this journey that I'm going down. And we'll see where it takes us. Okay. Have a great day.